Hi everyone! In this lesson we're going to ink our skulls so we get a clean and defined line. After, in the final lesson, we'll add some flat colour. So let's get to it. To start, create a new layer on top of your sketch. Name all the layers to know where and what you're working on all the time. On this layer is where we'll start the line art. The brush we're going to use is the same one we sketched with, but changing some of the properties. So we'll give it maximum opacity and less flow. That way the line is darker and more defined. I like to keep a bit of a flow on the opacity so it looks like the ink gradually runs out, but if you prefer you can keep it totally black. It's up to you. You could try out different preferences or brushes and find a line that you're comfortable with. Also, the stroke you choose should match your style. Maybe you like a more calligraphy style brush or one with a bit more noise like a marker pen. I like it to have some noise. I think the stroke is more interesting that way. There are different ways of approaching the line art, and I'll show you how I do it. I make the lines thicker depending on how much volume they contain. I mean the outside lines. The silhouette, for example, I'll make thicker and the inside lines thinner. I'll also shape the line depending on the volume, so when an element sticks out more, I like to apply slightly thicker lines than an element that sinks in. Or if there are areas with a strong shadow, then it's best to apply thicker lines there too. Then, with fine lines, I like to add the details to my drawing. You can explore different types of line art by looking for artists that use these techniques in their drawings. There are many different ways to ink, and mine isn't the only way that works. I'm just giving you some tips that are usually used in cartoon style drawing, but there are many more. You could also look for artists that use very fine lines or continuous lines in their drawings, or even very complex shading. Just look around and find the style that suits you. If there are lines you made in the sketching phase that you don't like or you're not sure about, you can ignore them and change them in the line art stage. However, you need to be careful if you do this and make sure the basic shapes are still correct. Sometimes we forget the basic perspective rules without realizing it. You can add additional lines inside a shape to make folds or texture. On this skull, I've added some noise to the cranium to give it a bone-like texture, and I've also added some fine lines here for a material texture. Try small details like this with fine lines and just see if you like the result. If you want your line art to look like mine, then the key is a thicker outside line. In the line art phase, you can really add style to your drawing. Some people work with very clean lines, others use vector lines if they work with software like Illustrator. Some of us work with a rougher line. When I say rough, I mean that I don't worry that some lines go on top of each other, overlap each other. I like that effect in my drawings. We're just talking about different styles. Try and ink the same sketch in 3 or 4 different ways and see which ones you like the best. This is a very useful way to define your own style. Everyone's personal style should show up in each step of the process, from the sketch to the colour. If you like, you can add shading in this phase, as long as you want there to be lines with shadow. There are many ways of adding shading. At the moment, I'm not adding anything. I might add a small line here and there, but practically nothing. I like the line to be cleaner and apply the shading with the colour. But decide how you want to do it, and look at how different artists do it too. I like to add little dots and marks to the designs to give some noise to the final artwork. I think sketches really add to the design, and I don't like to lose that information when I do the line art. So I sometimes take some of the sketch lines and go over them with a fine brush. You could try this technique if you like it, and if you feel comfortable using it. A good trick is to remove the pencil when you're finishing the line art to check if there are any lines you've left incomplete, or maybe you want to add some more lines in some areas. When you hide the pencil, the drawing can change quite a lot, and sometimes you don't like the result, maybe you preferred the sketch. That's why it's a good idea to remove the sketch lines every now and then and adjusting the line art to obtain what you want. As you've seen the line art process in the first skull in more detail, I'll skim through the others. Just stay with the general ideas. Maybe you drew each skull in a different style to experiment. If that's the case, I recommend you apply a different line art to try out new concepts. Never settle, always try out different ways of working. So our skulls are now inked. The next step is to apply the colour and finish our project. I hope you're still enjoying the course, and I'll see you in the next lesson.